everyone. We have a slightly unusual format this afternoon. I'm going to speak first for about 20 minutes, and then Pirjo will come up. We're hoping to collaborate and talk about something quite similar. And then we'll have a fireside conversation. Imagine a fireplace in between for about 10 minutes or so, and we'll open up for discussion as well. Now, today's topic is on something that I've been doing in Singapore, actually. Much of the data comes from Singapore. And it goes back probably about 10 years now, looking at how to help children who have difficulties learning mathematics. You might be wondering, okay, mathematics, working memory, what's the connection? You know, if you want to get a kid to be better at playing soccer, you just do some more soccer, or maybe running, maybe swimming, but working memory? So I'm going to start off just talking about why working memory, why do we do working memory intervention if we want to improve math. I'll review some of the literature very briefly, talking about some of the successes and disappointments, and then lay out some possibilities for the way ahead. As some of you may know, Singapore, math equals number one, right? Hong Kong is perhaps just a little bit below there. When I first went to Singapore, I was thinking, they're not going to fund math research. They're already doing so well. How much better can you get? But little did I know, the Singapore psyche is such that it's a real concern when you're up there. Because the only way to go when you're up there is down. And, you know, no one wants to go down, right? So there was quite a bit of attention being paid to engineering, math, in young children, and how to keep Singapore in the up at the top. The other thing was that when I started doing this work, there was quite a long tail in Singapore's performance. So overall the average performance was very high, but there was a long tail, and it was quite a concern from an equity perspective that a lot of the children who were not performing as well were from ethnic minority background. So each year, about 5.5% of young children struggle with math on entry to primary school. And the problem was that this kind of problem accumulates, so that by the time children got to primary 6, about 15% of young children have difficulties with math. And you see this not just in Singapore, but elsewhere in the world as well. So in the US, I've seen figures of about 20% of adults having difficulties figuring out store discounts. I'm okay with store discounts, 10% is okay, but here sometimes the figures are quite unusual. 78% off the original price, unusual figures that you really have to do some mental arithmetic. Now, in Singapore, and this is going back a few years now, there's quite a systematic provision of assistance to children. So all the children on entry to primary 1 was tested, given a test of early numeracy as well as Chinese and English. And those who are having difficulties with mathematics are given the option of enrolling in learning support programs. So most of the children take advantage of this. The program was initially just 1 year, and then was extended to 2 years. But the problem was that even at the end of the 2 years, perhaps not surprisingly to us, most of those children are still at the bottom of the class. So the Ministry of Education was quite concerned about that, and they wanted something else to be done, because there was already a lot of provision given to the children, but they didn't seem to be either taking full advantage of it, or the performance wasn't showing the kind of improvement that was desired. So this is about when I came in. It was really by happenstance, really. A senior officer at the Ministry of Education just finished her PhD, focusing on working memory, and learned about my work. And at that time, I was working with older children, 10-year-olds, looking at the cognitive underpinnings of children's performance on transition from junior primary school to senior primary school. She learned about my work, and then we started talking to see whether something can be done with the younger children. So at this point, perhaps I should lay out some definitions. Now, many of you are very familiar with working memory and executive functioning. Roberta talked about it this morning. And working memory is basically processing information and remembering information at the same time. So you might ask, when does one use working memory? Now, you're using it right now. Listening comprehension is very demanding on working memory because in order to understand speech, not only do you have to be able to understand each word, you also have to understand a sequence of words. Because a sentence is made up of different words. Even though you understand each word, you won't be able to make out what I'm saying unless you can remember what I said a few seconds ago. So it's processing, comprehending, as well as remembering at the same time. So the very definition of working memory, and you're using it right now. Particularly for those of you whose first language is not English, you're probably doing some level of translation as well, and then comprehending and remembering, so doubly heavy on your working memory. Now, before I kind of went into looking at intervention, I actually put in a longitudinal study because most of my previous work was focused on older children, 10-year-olds. But the focus of the ministry at the time was on younger kids, 6-year-olds, on the transition from kindergarten to primary school. So I ran a longitudinal study using an accelerated design. I tracked children for 4 years and ended up having a chain of data going from kindergarten all the way to grade 9. And what I found was that almost uniformly, with the exception of kindergarten, the correlation between working memory capacity and children's math achievements was really quite high. In the social sciences, in psychology, if you're hitting an average of about 0.5, you're looking at really quite a strong association. So that gave us some assurance that, well, working memory may well be the thing to target if we are trying to help these children who don't seem to be very responsive to traditional or supplemental mathematic instructions. Now, we also ran some predictive associations as well. So we fitted a math model to the data. And what we found was that there was really quite a consistent relation between working memory and math achievement. In fact, we found that the relationship between your working memory in 1 year and your math achievement in the next year was consistent all across the grades. What changed was the degree to which math performance was reliant on the previous year's math performance. As children got a bit older, the more they were reliant on the previous math knowledge, which makes sense, right? If you are not very good at arithmetic, you're really going to have difficulty with algebra or with calculus. Mathematics is at least school mathematics, is by and large linear and builds upon your early knowledge. Whereas with early numeracy skills, there are still more fundamental numeracy skills that you're relied on, but the amount of learned knowledge is quite a bit less as compared to later math. So the longitudinal data, there was some experimental data as well, which I didn't show, gave us confidence that there is not just a correlational association between working memory capacity and math performance, but that association seemed to be causal in nature as well. So it gave us confidence to go and start looking at intervention and looking at whether we could help children's math performance by improving their working memory capacity. Now, in fact, when we started looking, there was already some protocol and software out there already. One of the most widely used one was called CogMed. I think it stands for Cognitive Medicine. It came out from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. It ended up being a commercialized product. So there's a screenshot, there's a little robot, and different parts of the robot are, in fact, the applets that is used for training. So in this one, I think that's perhaps it's the fist. Different light dials will light up, and children were asked to remember which one lights up at different times. And similarly, down here, the numeric pads, they light up in a sequence, and children have to reproduce that sequence. And a number of digits that are lit up and the number of digits that children are asked to reproduce increases as the children got better. So there was some evidence that this kind of computer simulation, targeting children's working memory capacity did help children's math performance as well as working memory. So this was an early study done by Holmes, and what they showed was that there was compared to a control group, there was improvement in working memory, different kinds of working memory, and there was some improvement in mathematics as well, in particular in the 6-month follow-up. One thing that was a little bit unusual here was that immediately post-training, there was no improvement in math, and it was only in the delayed post-test that the improvement was seen. In some way, this makes sense, right? Because if you visualize the working memory capacity as your capacity to learn, just because you're more able to learn doesn't mean that you have already learned. You still need to go out there and learn the content, right? We talked about content this morning. So I have a big engine, right? But someone still needs to drive the car and know the road before you can go ahead and actually get somewhere. So this makes sense. But unfortunately, that's one of the few examples where there is a positive set of findings. Most subsequent studies have found that wherever improvement you get tends to be restricted to working memory capacity, and evidence of far transfer, either to mathematics or other academic areas, tend to be quite few and far between. So in this study by Roberts, for example, not only did we not find a positive transfer to mathematics, the children in the intervention group actually got a bit worse, perhaps because we were spending more time with the intervention rather than going to math class. Now, this intervention work started perhaps towards the beginning of this investigation on whether working memory intervention actually works. So this was my own early attempt in trying to design games, computerized intervention. So the idea here is that the little post bear, which is controlled by the child, is very keen on delivering mail. But there are all these little aliens that comes out and want to say hello, but the bear is so intent on delivering mail that he just wants to get the job done, right? So the child is asked to either skip or jump away, and you'll see that there's a little triangle, and that triangle is a sign for the child to start remembering the shape of the alien that was nearby. So at the end of the play section, children were asked to identify which was the last alien you saw, which was the last 2 alien, which was the last 3 alien. So it's very much like a working memory assessment, but gamified, if you like. Now, long story short, this one didn't work. And one of the reasons we thought was that we actually paid too much attention to the playing parts. Children ended up spending quite a bit of time playing, but not as much time trying to remember, which is the whole point, right? So we went back to the drawing board and we redesigned another whole suite of games. This time, 48 of them. Because by the time we went to this 3rd iteration, there was much more information on the kind of working memory intervention that worked and those that didn't. And the received wisdom was that in order to get any kind of fast transfer, you really need to spread your wings quite wide, not just training in one paradigm, but training in a whole suite of paradigm, and perhaps getting some numeric content into the training as well. So let me show you a screenshot. You get the idea, right? It's basically the same paradigm. The storyline is that the space ranger is going to rescue his friend, and then he has to go through all these numeric gates, and he has to remember which key card was used to open each gate. And after he's gone through all the gates, rescue the friend, they have to reopen the card, right? So again, kind of a little bit of processing and remembrance at the same time. Now, there were other versions that involve magnitude comparison. So in the top one, the screenshot with that applets was that children were asked to identify which number was larger as quickly as they could, and then they had to remember the location of the correct answer as well. So again, a typical working memory scenario, but with numeracy training embedded into it. We got a little bit warmer in terms of facilitation. So we use a number of numeric criterion measures, and what we found was that with the working memory, the numeric working memory training, as well as with the numeracy training, we got some facilitation effect, both on immediate post-test as well as on delayed post-test. And we found that effect for both the number line task as well as a numerical discrimination task. So we were a little bit happier when we got this set of results, but we were also concerned that the effect sizes were relatively small. We're running a replication of this in Thailand at the moment. So far, the findings are not as we expected, but with that sample, the children were from an average school. They weren't having math learning difficulties per se, whereas with this study, we identified children who were having difficulties with early math. So the reviews generally quite negative. Most of the reviews, and there are several now, have found that this kind of working memory intervention produces short-term effect, improving working memory, but you don't tend to see a lot of far transfer to mathematics. In fact, there was one chapter that was entitled "Don't Buy the Snake Oil," which is not going to get you there. Now, prognosis. One take as to why this kind of intervention is not working, despite the very strong association between working memory and math performance, is that the protocols that we have been using are just not up to speed. Right? Most of the protocols that have been found are based on either CogMed or very similar paradigms. Most are based on the principle of practice makes master. And there are some studies suggesting that this is perhaps just not the right way to go, that working memory capacity being such a fundamental cognitive skills is not like a muscle. The more you push, the bigger it gets. Perhaps it doesn't work that way. Most training protocols are short as well, mostly 20 days. But if we go back to the intelligence training literature, in fact, if we go back to our daily education experience, we'll know that in 20 days, typically, that's not such a long time, right? And we're not talking about 20 solid days. We're talking about maybe 10 minutes, 35 minutes, spread out over a 20-day period. So the actual dosage itself is also relatively short. And then another possibility is that the existing interventions may just have not captured what is necessary to improve working memory. There are some suggestions that even with a relatively simple working memory task, the number of sub-processes, the number of cognitive sub-processes are actually quite large, and one needs to train up most of those processes if one is going to see the kind of facilitation that is needed. Now, perhaps a more fundamental point is maybe we're barking up the wrong tree altogether. There's some suggestions that working memory capacity has a large biological determinant and is relatively resistant to change, despite children improving with age. Trying to get them to be relatively better than the peers is something that is quite difficult. Susan Gatherco, who has done a lot of the early work on working memory, went as far as saying that working memory is unlikely to result in any far transfer. because the number of subroutines that are needed is just so large that any short-term intervention is very unlikely to do the trick. So, relatively depressing so far. Where to now? Are we, should we just pack up and go home as far as this goes? I think I'm not quite ready yet, almost, but not quite ready yet. But if we look at some of the, Diamond had a tremendous review a few years ago. The longest review that I've ever seen, it was 120 pages long. What I surmise from that is that in order to have successful working memory, you really need to have several ingredients. You need to have a large number of subroutines being trained. There needs to be some exposure to numeracy stimuli as part of the training. It involves some degree of physical exertion. And more importantly, to have a social environment that is self-reinforcing so the children will do it over and over again. So when I was listening to Roberta's talk this morning, a lot of what she was recommended really has a lot of these elements embedded into it. And based on that, and in this conference, I've seen quite a few talks that have elements of that. Just went to Sam's talk this morning, looking at board games. Jenny has an intervention based on the scenario in the kitchen, a cooking scenario. My doctorate student, Luran, where is she? Somewhere. There she is. Luran is looking at perhaps these learning-related behaviors are very important. And if we don't target learning-related behavior, which could be a very important mediator, you're not going to get the file transfer. Alfredo has done a lot of work looking at rhythm and movement and looking at using motor skills to try to improve children's self-regulation. And our ex-colleague, Catherine Capio, has also been focusing on motor skills. And there seems to be something in motor skills. That ability to put everything together in your mind, to put it into action, seems to, in some way, improve executive functioning. We don't know exactly the mechanism yet, but that's something that there's active research on, and that's something that Pirjo is going to pick up on and going to tell us in more detail. So let me invite Pirjo to come up and talk about motor skills.
Okay, I'm very glad to be here, a little bit nervous. I'm the first non-native English speaker keynote. So pardon all my mistake already in the beginning. I'm talking about educational interventions. This is very heart of my whole career. I'm a professor of special educational needs, and I have been circulating my boxes. I already showed this a couple of other occasions here, but I do research about development of mathematical skills and assessment and interventions. And here today I think my job is a little bit let you to think that how can we do our research better, and a little bit bring in here that majority country perspective, as our data is very often coming only from United States or English-speaking countries, so I'm trying to bring in a little bit something else. And I'm puzzled, as is Kerry as well as me, to tackle with the issue that how on earth we get the educational intervention effective. So here we go. Early numeracy shortly for me means understanding mathematical relation, counting skills, basic skills in arithmetic, and symbolic and unsymbolic number sense. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about early numeracy. Why these? Because these seems to be the key skills to predict mathematical learning difficulties in early ages. So that's why we focus on this. I'm lucky that I'm not the only one doing research about it. For example, Declan Devlin's paper put together a couple of models and found the same. Early numeracy has 4 factors. It's not to say that these curriculum-aligned things in mathematics are not important. They are important, but they are not predicting mathematical learning difficulties. Educational intervention, what I mean with it is that often we aim to study development in various populations using intervention paradigm. But for me, it is more have been and will be probably in my career that I study possibilities to intervene children's lives in a positive way. I try to make the bad prognosis better. And so I'm talking about that kind of interventions today. So why early numeracy with fundamental motor skills and physical activity? Because this is our research group line at the moment. So why on earth do we need physical activity with mathematics? Early numeracy, we know already, as I said, it predicts very well later success in math. But early numeracy interventions have been less sustainable effects. As Kerry was saying, we get quite easily the effects right after intervention, but they don't stay. So when we stop teaching with our manners, the children get at the level where they started. So they are not really effective. And so me and my colleagues started to think that, okay, can we bring in something else in early numeracy intervention to boost the effect of early math learning? And we already had collaboration with Kerry's lab, knowing that, okay, well, the EF, so executive function, was not necessarily the most beneficial one. And at the same time, there were studies with physical activity and motor skills saying that maybe it is so that both of them affect executive functions, and that produced the effect on early numeracy. So that's the way we took. Before we started to develop our own intervention programs, we did a couple of reviews, quite extensive ones. First of them were with the average population, and we wanted to find all studies that had fundamental motor skills. So those are those gross motor skills, so not these tiny things, but really moving. And physical activity intervention and their effects on cognitive and academic learning. We found out that there are quite little studies with big effects, with good quality. So you should be green in color to being a good quality study, and then you should be here to be having a large effect. So not necessarily good thing. We did another with a review with focusing on children with learning difficulties, the same focus, find the same thing, quite poor quality, so lots of red and yellow, not so much green, which would be the good quality study, and not so much large effects. But from both of these reviews, we can summarize that if you have fundamental motor skills and physical activity in your intervention, it might be beneficial for children's learning in both groups, so meaning those who have learning difficulties and those who are performing average, and those the ages were like under 8 years old. And what is the most important, combined interventions. So those interventions that have the motor skills and physical activity plus academic skill or cognitive skills were effective. So it was like a double dose. That seems to be helping children to learn. So I think that's something what Kerry was kind of hinting. What can we really put there on top of it to make it as a booster effect? So these reviews showed that that might be something good to do. But as a researcher, we should kind of remember that the quality in original studies measured really with good standards was not so very good. So we have to kind of be careful making big assumptions from here. But because I'm a Finnish, we are really stubborn, so I continued. There must be something. So before I go to the intervention parts or showing the results from intervention, quickly our methods to measure the effects. So motor skills, we had locomotor and object control skills and stability skills measured. Then we had executive functions, we had working memory, inhibition and switching, and this is from Kerry's lab. If somebody working with Kerry, this is Kerry's part of the project. And early numeracy was the measure with the early numeracy test. This is originally from the Netherlands, and I'm one of those who brought it to Finland and validated it and published it. So it is quite widely used in research and by the practitioners, and it is measuring numerical relational skills and counting skills. And here comes the one new measurement that we have not yet published, hopefully will. We did a mathematical problem-solving task to be able to measure children who are 3 to 6 years old and their mathematical problem-solving skills. These are kind of a really new way of measuring math problem-solving, and let's see what comes out of it, but it seems to be working very well at the moment. We have a data to kind of say that we can use it. We also had Bert's measurement inside our set, and we were measuring symbolic magnitude processing, which is very profound mathematical skill predicting quite well mathematical performance. Children need to know which one is bigger. Here we go. First intervention, small one, but still. We had a pilot study, and I have to say here for excuse, this was when the COVID hit, and so everything what we could do in preschools was good, and we were happy with it. So here we had a very small sample size, 18 children who we followed up a couple of times before the intervention, and then we measured it before, right after, and delayed. And we used early numeracy test, symbolic magnitude processing, and then we had fundamental motor skills tested. And we developed an own intervention program where we put motor skill practice and early numeracy practice in, and we used storybooks. So we had storybooks full of relational skills and tasks, for example, bigger and smaller, larger, and so on. Then very basic relational skills, and they were practiced with context of early numeracy and with context of motor skills. So, for example, they first read a book, and then they had the kind of a skill, kind of a path where they practiced different skills, and they were related to the same concept. And it was 45 minutes each, twice a week for 8 weeks, so quite little. And the results show that with this small thing, so teacher reading books and having practice with the motor skills, the children learned. So and these were low-performing kids, so meaning that they already had problems with these early numeracy skills. They had especially better skills in numerical relational tasks. So they learned which is bigger, which is smaller. They learned seriation. They learned one-to-one correspondence there. So it seemed to be okay. A little bit green light, maybe there is something. So we continued. Next paper, this is out only lately, I think a couple of days ago. Again, we had 16 sessions and 45 minutes and 8 weeks, and we had now here 3 groups. We have those who had the combined intervention, those who got only early numeracy, and those who got fundamental motor skills. So really this kind of a classical design. And results show that early numeracy and mathematical problem solving skills can be supported with our combined intervention. And it was so that it was especially with our combined one, so this one, it was possible to support both early mathematical skills and fundamental motor skills. And what was interesting, so before Kerry, you throw away the working memory totally, so updating ability predicted the improvements in early numeracy. So maybe we should keep it, maybe. And other ones, socioeconomic status, inhibition, switching, age, and prior performance in motor skills, no effect. So it was really something there. And now we go to Africa. This is already a bit old paper, but I'm quite proud of this one, because this was the first intervention study in my career where we got, with early numeracy intervention program, sustainable effects in children's learning. These children were 6 years old, at school in Johannesburg area, poor part of the city, and we divided them to be in different groups and found out here is first a little bit about our math. This was a different intervention program, practicing only math, and it has the basic stuff in numerical, relational, and counting skills in, and it was a supplementary, so it was an additional practice for the children, and it has this explicit teaching or direct teaching, as we heard this morning, which has been shown to be very good for low-performing kids. And they did it for 3 times per week for 5 weeks. And teachers did them. So both of these programs were the ones that were designed for teachers to be the active persons in our interventions. And what we found that especially the relational skills also here were affected. So this way we could help children to learn their early numerical relational skills, so those one-to-one correspondence, seriation, classification skills. And what was interesting that it stayed, which is really, really nice. I don't know how much have you done research, but I'm very happy with this kind of results. And I have actually promised that I will retire when I get the one intervention done that has sustainable effects. So maybe I should go now, but maybe still 5 minutes and then I go. On counting skills, a little bit different, but still the effects were there. So especially we saw that the executive functions were exert positive effect on children's counting skills. So somehow I'm not ready to throw the executive function out of the picture yet. So because in here it seems to be boosting the effect. So I think that we kind of have to think about what are the roles of everything in our interventions, and then maybe it is good to kind of think what kind of ideas we have to put in intervention programs. But this was quite nice result, at least for me. This has been published open access. Everybody can use it. You can just log in the web pages. So this is my last slide, and this is actually saying how much we have to still to do. I'm trying to figure out how we get the educational interventions better, and how we get the studies that make educational intervention or test the effects of educational interventions better. I'm not entirely satisfied of the quality of science we have there at the moment. And this is a ladder of evidence what we need. And here is the descriptive evidence, theoretical evidence, and then first empirical evidence, good empirical evidence, strong empirical evidence. This is where we should end up. But often we see studies that have only some some evidence from very low level, in a sense that I'm trying to kind of say that if you are planning an educational intervention, it might be good that you do, as we did, a good theoretical framework behind it first in terms of reviews and meta-analysis. That is a good idea, I think. And then there is different ways to kind of bring in the evidence that this works. But it's not a one study that you can do all. We have to do several studies to kind of bring in the evidence. And what I have marked here red, it's for myself, that these we have failed totally. We haven't included teachers to really make the materials. We are doing it at the moment in South Africa. It's terribly hard, but we are going there. Slow, I'm really kind of fast person. And slowness is something that it's hard for me, but I can learn. But this is something that really is important in educational intervention. And believe me or not, it's often lacking in the papers that I review for journals in almost every time. So I just hope this is kind of a framework that we could start to use when we are publishing educational interventions and check that with what kind of evidence we have or not to support the effects of our educational interventions. And then we are here. Thank you.
So
it's his turn. I'm trying to be silent because I'm usually the one who starts to talk. So.
I'm trying to be ponderous. I was thinking with some of the research with working memory, it's often done at the beginning of grade 1, so 6 years of age. Whereas some of the early numeracy intervention that is shown to be efficacious can be done as early as when children are 4 to 5 year olds, when they're still in kindergarten. Do you think we're just starting too late with those working memory training?
Yes, and that's what I was thinking when you were presenting, because we have done all these now where we got kind of a good and sustainable effect, so they are in a delayed measurement as well. They are in younger children. So possibly, is it so that in those Singaporean studies you are starting later, so the basic working memory is probably quite well developed already, and they are already quite good. So how about if you would go, for example, South Africa, and very poor circumstances, and younger kids? There might be really helpful for the children to have such a practice. So,
I mean, that there are two things there. One is that, I mean, we know from other kind of research that when we try to help population that comes from a deprived background or clearly underperforming, it's easier to get some improvement as compared to when you have a sample of children who are already performing on average and you try to get them up there. That increment, even though it might be quantitatively the same, is this bit is much more difficult. With working memory as well, the other difficulty is that when I looked at some of the data, longitudinal data, tracking from a very young age, preschool age, all the way to the adolescent years, oftentimes there's very little individual differences in the rates of growth, right? Which means that if they start low, even 5 years later, 10 years later, they remain low. Start high, they remain high. So they all improve, but the rates of improvement don't change, which again suggests that if we want to start doing the intervention, we need to do it very, very early on. Now this is, I mean, just focusing on the working memory aspect, not even talking about the file transfer yet.
But then again, we have also results that, longitudinal results with younger children, that EF is an important mediator between fundamental motor skills and early numeracy. So in a sense it tells that it has a role in that kind of skills practice, let's say that way. So it was not the physical activity per se, so the kind of intensity and how much the children were active, but it was the skills that they had. And that via executive function were related to better early numeracy development or the worst. So I think that I'm wondering if our interventions where we have the skills training in motor side and in early numeracy side, they still both kind of have effect also the executive functions and in their working memory.
And whether working memory just needs to be of a sufficient level that allows you to perform what you need to do, or does it actually need to be higher? I mean, the difficulty is that the association that we've found between working memory and math performance is relatively linear. So, you don't see this plateau effect, right? It almost, you not quite a linear relation, but you can get higher math performance from children. The relation is quite linear. Whereas if it is the case that you just need a sufficient level, you would expect a non-linear or curvilinear relation. Right?
But do we have studies that have been doing it so that it has been based on the level of executive functions, the groupings? For example, if we would have like a intervention control group design, is there studies that could have used this kind of level of executive functions, putting there into the also combining other than executive functions? So okay, if you are on only those, but I was just thinking that if we would have executive function groups and we could divide them, for example, those who are low in executive function often have low math, right? Especially in small children.
Yes.
So, but we haven't divided them with both. So with both executive function and math, we have only used math. So that could be something that we take them both in and then try this skills practice.
In our previous intervention, we typically control for both, and then we randomize within those two groups, having control for both early numeracy as well as.
But then you practiced only
memory. Yeah.
But if we could, based on now the what we found in physical activity and motor skills intervention on cognition, then kind of a combined version.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we can open up to the audience, because I know there are several people who are also doing math research. Jenny's here. I don't know if Sam is here. I went to his talk earlier. Any thoughts on Roberta?
We're going to go after working memory. I've seen a lot of studies showing working memory is a problem for kids with math difficulties, but so is language. So it's not clear to me why one goes after one versus the other. And then for Pirjo, in the studies that you did you have groups that just received your math training and they did not profit to the same extent as the ones who got the math and the motor?
I have to think it was the last study that we had, so that we had there combined, and then we had separate early numeracy and separate motor skills. So early numeracy, like only, also boosted the early numeracy development, but the development was a little bit bigger in that combined group.
So there is theory that can help you with that, and it's the theory on embodiment. So when we use our bodies, and this may be especially true for little kids, when you use your bodies, I don't know the nature of the motor intervention you used, but if the bodies were involved in counting and being used for mathematical operations, then I could argue that by pulling in the body, you're making a difference. So I think you have some more theory to explore for why. And to Kerry, I ask why keep going that way when there were other comorbidities. Yeah, I don't know.
No, you're right. With the going back to the Singapore sample, there's a high level of comorbidity in language and math performance, even at primary one. I think children who are enrolled in the learning support program, about 70% of them are also enrolled in the language program. So in our intervention, we do take that into account in assigning to groups and controlling for language performance. I think if memory serves, in one of the studies, we did measure language as an outcome as well. You know, when I was at your talk this morning, I was thinking, again, are we barking up the wrong tree? Because you're showing improvement to self-regulation with classroom-based intervention, right? Now, with younger children. But then I was thinking, the starting point in terms of my intervention was that the ordinary classroom supplemental intervention for mathematics or average classes weren't doing the job. But that doesn't, I mean, one possibility is that what was done in terms of the classroom instruction just wasn't good enough. But it doesn't preclude the possibility that we do something else in the classroom, still in the realm of teaching math rather than improving working memory, will have a more direct effect on math performance. Especially if we do it early on. Yeah. But I think the incidental, you know, you were talking about guided play. The learning is almost incidental, and it depends a lot on the teacher's professionalism and ability to notice. And in our setting, classrooms are large, 30-odd kids. Sometimes in the Thai people I work with, can be up to 40 to 50 kids.
There are small group interventions where a kid who gets it works with a kid who doesn't get it, and maybe 3 and 4 kids. I mean, kids really like to help each other, and if you can establish how to talk to each other, you can't say, oh, that's dumb, You have to have ground rules that kids can learn.
Yes, yes.
So it might be the case that they would be better off being talked to with other children who see the world their way. There must be things in the literature that look at, there must be, motor involvement in math learning and small groups in early math learning. I don't know this literature, but I would think some is out there.
But basically, what I would like here to kind of us to remember that we are talking about children, young children who have low performance in early math and who will later on develop possibly to be identified as mathematical learning difficulties. So that is happening only at school age. But those kids hate or avoid mathematical situation quite early on. So I'm kind of understanding in the logic that we have guided play and we have other kids who help, but you have to kind of understand the point of view of those children that they not necessarily want to learn mathematical skills. because they are quite hard for them and they are uninteresting for them. So we have to have kind of also quite strong possibilities to invite them in a situation where they practice them. And I think that here in this conference we also saw really nice ideas that there is this game, very simple board game with practicing. It was with parents, with children, but that could be used also in preschools. So we just need a lot of information for the educators, what is important, where they should focus on. And that was, for example, why we did the model of 2016, was to guide the teachers and make their life easier in a sense that these 4 factors of early numeracy are the most important if you want to secure the basic skills in children. So I think there is a lot of things here now involved. That are we talking about like a intervention in a classroom level or with a small group level, and what are the possibilities in different cultural contexts. We can in Finland be really pushy with our thinking that okay, 16 children is really, really big. And I have to only take an airplane to South Africa and see, and 16 children is really, really small. So the perspective is also, that's what I was just hoping, that conferences like this would boost our thinking that majority of the children live somewhere else than English-speaking, well-off countries. And we, as an educational researcher, are responsible of producing things that they can use there for their learning also. So I think this kind of perspective is also important.
So there's work by Elizabeth Spelke and Molly Dillon, and they have gone into India.
Yeah.
And I don't know the details of what they're doing, but they say they're making differences. There's somebody in Argentina who uses computer interventions, and she has shown that she can boost, Andrea Golden, that she can boost executive function. And I don't know if she's also done stuff on math, but I think you're right, that the one-on-one approach may not be the most effective. We need more research.
Yeah. A lot of it.